Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end-of-life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Welcome to another episode. Today, I am really grateful to have Jessica Fein with us. She's the author of Breathtaking, a beautiful memoir about her and her family's journey with her daughter, Dalia, who was diagnosed with a rare degenerative disease called MERRF syndrome. That's short for myoclonic epilepsy with ragged red fibers. In this episode, we're going to talk about the challenges Jessica faced, the strength it took to advocate for Dalia, and the powerful lessons she learned about staying present. So grab a cup of something warm, find a comfortable seat, and join us for the conversation. Jessica, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you start off by telling us your journey that led you to write Breathtaking?
Absolutely. How much time do we have for that?
Go all out.
Okay. All right. I hope everybody really did get comfy and get their cup of something and maybe like a warm throw. I don't know. We need to be real cozy for this one. So yes, as you said, and thank you for actually mentioning the name of my daughter's illness, which is something that not many people do. And it's important to me because I really do want to raise awareness. My husband and I adopted 3 children from Guatemala, and our middle daughter, Dalia, was diagnosed at 5 with, as you said, MERRF syndrome, myoclonic epilepsy, ragged red fibers, which is a degenerative form of mitochondrial disease. Now, before that diagnosis, she had been developing more or less normally, but I had had a little suspicion that perhaps something was not quite typical. Of course, I had been told over and over again by every specialist and doctor, give her time, she'll catch up. But lo and behold, at 5, a series of tests led us to this diagnosis. And a diagnosis like this is at the same time both totally life-changing and absolutely irrelevant, because when you're given a diagnosis, you know that your future is going to look nothing like the one you had imagined. And yet nothing actually radically changes for some time. So it's a very weird place to live in this in-between. And in fact, our in-between was about 4 years. When Dalia was 9, she caught a cold, and that cold became pneumonia, and then pneumonia landed us in the ICU for 3 months. And for us, that's really when everything changed, because 3 months later, when we left the ICU, Dalia had lost a lot of functionality. She was, as I said, 9 years old, and she had a tracheotomy, which is when you have a hole in the neck with a little tube and you breathe through that. She needed a ventilator in order to breathe at that point, and she became dependent on a feeding tube and a wheelchair and a whole host of equipment. And our world really then was turned upside down for the next 8 years as the disease progressed.
Now, for those unfamiliar with MERRF syndrome, I know you did high level there, but can you go into a little more detail about what it is?
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, it's a rare form of mitochondrial disease. And so mitochondria, which some of your listeners might know, but I will be very clear, I did not know. And in fact, it was like mitochondria, like I know, I learned this in high school, vaguely familiar, cells, power, but I had no idea. I mean, I was addicted to Googling after this diagnosis. But what I learned or relearned is that mitochondria are the powerhouse of the body's cells, right? They convert protein into energy. So if your mitochondria are not working properly, then your organs can't work properly. So wherever in your body you have those erroneous mitochondria, that organ isn't going to have the energy to work as it ought to be working. So the one of the best ways to think about it is, you know, the little thing on your phone that shows how much power you have in your battery in the upper corner. With a mitochondrial disease, you're starting on like a little teeny tiny bit of of power there, right? I mean, it's like you're always just about to run out. And doing something seemingly simple can really make you need to like be in bed and recharge. So it is an energy deficiency disease, and it can affect the functioning of every one of your organs.
Thank you for that. Really, that representation of the phone, it really, that's right on key. So I appreciate that. In the book, you discuss becoming an expert on Dalia's disorder, often knowing more than the doctors. How did that affect your role as an advocate for her? That must have been really challenging to be in that situation.
It's such a strange thing, and it is not unique in terms of rare diseases. I have spoken with so many people who are either themselves people with rare diseases or caregivers for people with rare diseases. And it's such an interesting arc because what happens is 9 times out of 10, when you're given this diagnosis, you've never heard of it. You don't understand the words like I didn't. You have no idea what it means. And you feel like you are completely at the mercy of the medical field. And that is surely how I felt. But what happens is, as the person who is closest to this disease, you become expert in the nuances. And for sure, you become experts in my case, it was my child, but the person you're caregiving for. So what happens is then, without not that long a time from the diagnosis, you'll see that the medical staff will start deferring to you because they understand that you know more than most people do. Because the fact is, doctors cannot be expert in every single solitary rare disease and every single thing that there is, right? And we had that experience most profoundly during that hospital stay that I was referencing a moment ago in Florida, because we were on vacation in Florida. We actually live in Boston when we landed in the hospital. And there was not a metabolic expert who understood what MERRF syndrome was, and there was not even a mitochondrial expert. So we, as the parents, really found ourselves educating the doctors. And on the one hand, it's a beautiful thing that doctors have the understanding that the parents know their child best. I mean, that's very great, and you feel really respected. And on the other hand, it's terrifying. It's like, wait, I'm the expert? I know not. I was the one who didn't know what mitochondria were. What do you mean I'm the expert? So, it's kind of, great and horrible to be in that position.
I'm curious about the reality of having of being an advocate and having a child who has a rare condition. I know both of you worked beforehand. Like, what is the day-to-day reality like?
I will tell you that the day-to-day reality is insane. And so, just to paint the picture, my husband and I both worked full time, as you mentioned. He's a high school teacher, and I was very senior in a global corporate organization. We also had two other children. Dalia was our middle child. Dalia was an eyes-on patient from age 9 to 17, meaning myself, my husband, or a nurse trained specifically in her care needed to have our eyes on her 24/7. So just to be clear, like if I'm home alone with Dalia and I have to go to the bathroom, I'm wheeling her in with me. Like she cannot be alone. So that was the reality. We had a lot of nursing care, so we were lucky for that, but we did not have 24/7 nursing care 7 days, every single day. We didn't have 24-hour care. If a nurse calls out for an overnight shift, it means either myself or my husband is spending the night in Dalia's room. If a nurse calls out for a day shift, one of us isn't going to work. But more than that, it's about living on the precipice all the time because everything has to be just so in order for things to be functioning. There were many days, and this is not an exaggeration, where I would show up at work at 8:30 in the morning, and I would have quite literally saved my daughter's life that morning. I mean, you're in a life and death situation all the time because you've got machinery that is responsible for keeping somebody alive. All of that is happening, and you're a busy parent. You're just trying to create a wonderful childhood for all of your kids. Dahlia and her siblings. So you're doing all the things that parents do and keeping 5 bazillion balls in the air while you're doing it. I mean, there is our home was like a mini ICU, but you kind of put all of that in the periphery as much as you can so that you can and go about your day-to-day existence and give your kids a childhood.
I remember in the book how you talked about your world shrinking just because you had to have eyes on Dahlia at all times, and you couldn't have just friends come over and take care of Dahlia for an hour or so. So you could take a shower, you could go grocery shopping, or you could do whatever you wanted to do. How difficult that was. Um,
Yeah, and really so unusual. I mean, I'll give you an example. We had a caregiver who spent a lot of time in our house. She was not a nurse, she was a helper. And she, other than the 4 of us, myself, my husband, and our other 2 children, definitely was closest to Dahlia. And one day, my husband and I had to go somewhere. The other kids were gone, and I left this person with a nurse and Dahlia, and the nurse left. Okay, so now I had an adult with Dahlia who has spent 5 days a week with Dahlia, but no nurse. She called me, I was on the road in such a panic. There ended up being a court case about it. It was a whole thing because that nurse left. But the idea that you can't be in that situation if you don't understand the medical care. You just can't, no matter how close you are to somebody, no matter how much you adore them, no matter how much they trust you. And so it's very different when you think about all the other kinds of caregiving that we're accustomed to. You know, most notably, you think about a newborn, and it's exhausting and it's scary, but it's also glorious and delightful. And you could pretty much leave your baby with, most people. Most people, if push comes to shove, could watch a baby for an hour. This isn't that.
I remember reading the book, and to make it very clear for people who are listening or watching, it wasn't like Dahlia was a newborn baby. She was so wise. I remember just thinking about that reading the book. So intelligent, so wise, so full of life. And she rejoiced. She loved this person that you were talking about that was there 5 days a week. She was definitely a child with her own views, with her own wants. And that really was wonderful to see. It was really pretty amazing.
Yeah, and Dahlia, yes, I would do, we could do a whole show just about the magic of Dahlia, and that would probably be a lot more fun to talk about. But yes, this is a fully formed human being who is smarter than probably most of us, for sure, sweeter, kinder, more interesting than most of us. And that's really what we focused on. All the other stuff was, both a tragedy and an inconvenience, because really we just wanted to spend time with our girl.
Yeah, but she accepted the things that were happening. I'm sure there were days that weren't good, but she accepted for the most part things that were happening, and she just took it in stride. She's like, okay, this is what it is now. Let's have fun.
Let's have
Do,
fun.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. It was not, I'm angry and I'm bitter and I'm freaking out and I'm sad. It was, let's move on and do stuff, like let's go. But where's
Yeah.
Taylor Swift?
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. What advice would you give others that find themselves in the role as both a parent and an advocate?
I think that one of the pieces I would give is to keep the roles separate as much as you can, meaning don't become an advocate at the expense of being a parent, because being a parent is where you can both have the fun and the love and all the good stuff, and the discipline and the other things that come along with being a parent. Being an advocate is something different. And yes, as a parent, we are our kid's best advocate, no question. But there is a temptation to say, all I'm going to do is advocate. All I'm going to do is advocate because I'm going to cure this. I'm going to fix this. And you're not going to. I mean, maybe you are, but, and I hope you do, but you might not. And if you've spent all your energy trying to do that and forgotten to be a parent, then that's going to be pretty sad for everybody involved.
Good advice. Now, the title of your book, Breathtaking, has really deep meaning. I remember, I think it was Karen that kept telling you to take deep breaths. I don't know if that's where it came from, but can you share the significance behind the title?
Yes. So there are so many meanings for me with breathtaking, and that's why I chose it as the name of the book and think it's really appropriate. So first of all, quite literally, MERRF syndrome did take my daughter's breath from her. And then there is this whole idea of taking a breath. And for me, I did have to learn to be more in the present. I did have to learn to slow down and take a breath. And yes, the scene you're talking about is where I'm going a mile a minute. And my cousin says, okay, come on, take a breath, which we say to people all the time. And I remember, in the moment being like super offended by it, just because I was like, I cannot do that right now. There's too much happening. But it is obviously something that is a big transformation for me in the book, which is this learning to be more present. And then the third is breathtaking, and it's about beauty, and it's about creating corners of beauty, even in the most horrible circumstances, which is what we really focused on doing.
Yeah, I'm curious again about self-care. Since you guys were so busy, how did you find time for that?
Yeah. Well, there were a few ways. First of all, my husband and I each gave each other a night off during the week. And we're very lucky that we have a partner in this situation. When I think about somebody doing this solo, that's pretty unimaginable. Well, I don't like to say unimaginable. We can imagine, but it's a pretty horrible proposition. But having that one night off a week meant so much for us. And it was really funny because we got the idea from another couple who had one child who was healthy, and they were telling us that they did this for each other. We were like, why don't we do that? Because knowing that I had that one night a week to go off and do whatever I wanted to do, that was a whole lot of self-care. Another thing for me that was self-care was the writing. I wrote this book at Dalia's bedside, and that was definitely a really great outlet for me. And I think having people, not necessarily that I spent much time with in person, but I do have a terrific circle of girlfriends and people that I talk to, and that kind of people I've known for my whole life. And I think that was helpful as well. It's about more than like getting the manicure or whatever. It's really, though I am perfectly fine to get a manicure or a blowout anytime, but you need something that's, I think, going to be a little bit more sustaining, or at least I did.
Yeah, that community. Now, one of the themes that stood out to me from the book is the concept of the before and the after, and that the points of time that really define our lives. And there was one of those points in time where you knew that you realized that Dalia didn't have long to live. And so you really pivot and you learned to become fully present.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been immensely difficult.
Yeah, I have had a lot of life splitting moments. I have had a lot of loss, and some of the befores and afters are things we can anticipate, and some are not. And I've had both, right? I've had people closest to me die suddenly, and I've had ones that have died at the end of an extended illness. They're all terrible, people, you might think like, is it better to know or not to know? Whatever. They're all terrible, just different. And I don't know that knowing necessarily makes it any easier. But there's definitely a different kind of process leading up to it, as obviously in your work.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a difference? Because I know that you had your mother pass away. You had your sister pass away unexpectedly. You had your mother who was sick, and then you had your father who was pretty unexpected also, I think I recall.
And then my other sister, yeah, it's interesting with my parents,
your
one
other
was
sister.
expected and one wasn't, meaning one had cancer and one died on the way home from a party. And with my sisters, one died suddenly and one was at the end of an illness. So yeah, it's different. I suppose you don't want to watch somebody suffer and be sick. But on the other hand, the shock of, like, with my first sister, I was on the phone with her, and then 3 hours later, she died. So that's like a whole other element you have to learn to incorporate into your grief when there's the shock.
With Dalia, with that grief, did you ever feel any guilt, or did you ever feel, any different emotions?
Oh my God. First of all, we are so good at making ourselves feel guilty. I felt guilty for everything. I still do. I mean,
Mm.
we excel, I think. And I say we because I've talked to so many people about this, but we're so good at guilt, particularly guilt and grief. I mean, we feel guilty if we think we're not grieving enough. We feel guilty if we're grieving too long, which there's no such thing. We feel guilty if we smile. We feel guilty if we don't. You know what I mean? Like, I've written several articles on this because I feel like we just need to cut ourselves some slack, but we want to just chastise ourselves. And instead of being able to really give ourselves grace, which is what we need more than anything. And when you have a child who's ill, of course, there's so much to question. Did we do enough? Did we do the right thing? I know we did. I know we did the best we could by Dalia in terms of the medical care. There's no question. Of course, I feel like I wish I had spent every single second. How could I have even possibly ever stepped foot outside the house? You wonder about everything, but then you have to believe that you did the best you could in that moment.
Yeah. I think that people are under this misconception, or believe in this misconception, that when you're grieving, that's all you can do. And that's all, versus, okay, the human brain, we grieve, and then we toggle back and forth from, you could laugh and you could still be grieving. You could go out to a movie and still be, and
Yeah. And I mean, look, I intend to be grieving every day for the rest of my life.
yeah.
I wouldn't want it any other way. Therefore, if we start with that as the assumption, I'm grieving every single day for the rest of my life, I better figure out how to also be able to smile and have joy and go to the movies and do all the other things.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to sit in a dark room grieving for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want that. But look, my first sister died decades ago. I still am grieving for her every single day. Like, that's not a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. That's the only way I could possibly imagine it. That, when these people who are closest to you die, you're always grieve that
Yeah.
loss.
Definitely. You often wrote about, in the book, the importance of being vulnerable. And how did
Yeah.
being vulnerable with your emotions and grief help you? And what role did it play in your relationship with Dalia?
Yeah. Well, being vulnerable was not something that originally came easily to me, nor the idea of being open. Now, clearly, I have written a memoir, so we can assume I've gotten over that, right? But what I've learned is how important it is for so many reasons. Number one, it is not helpful to anybody if we put on this facade of strength, right? If we put on a facade of strength, it's A, exhausting, and B, if everybody thinks we're so strong, nobody thinks we need support. So that doesn't help anybody. Also, if everybody thinks we're so strong, then it makes them think there's something wrong with them if they're not strong, right? So I think it's a number of things. I think it's, if we want to be in meaningful relationships with people, if we want it to be a give and take, we need to be able to be honest. And if we are honest, we are being open and we are being vulnerable. And I think that if we can meet vulnerability with empathy rather than awkwardness, we'll have a much more connected society and a much more meaningful relationships.
Yeah. And I also think that that is part of modeling too, modeling what healthy grieving looks like.
Yeah. And I screwed that up all over the place until I'm right. I mean, I was like, I'm so strong. I'm going to carry this for my other kids so they don't have to, have any more burdens. And then they were like, one of my kids pointed it out to me. And of course, I have a whole chapter on this in the book because I thought that I was doing right by my other kids by trying to shoulder what was happening. which is ludicrous in hindsight at the time. Again, we're all about giving ourselves grace for what I had the best intentions. But my eldest said to me, something's wrong with me. I'm so scared and I'm so angry and I pray and I pray and I pray and she's not getting any better. But you're fine. What's wrong with me? And I thought, oh boy, no, honey, I am not fine. And I am so sorry that I let you believe that, because I mean, our kids need to see that all of these emotions, the fear and the anger and the anxiety, etc., that those are normal and that we can move forward with them.
And as adults, we always question, as you said, we're so good at feeling guilty. We're so good at putting the guilt trip on ourselves. And if we find it hard to be able to be open and to grieve, I know kids, they just want to fit in. The majority of kids, they want to fit in. Can you imagine how it feels not knowing that other people feel this way?
Exactly.
I,
Exactly.
um, I know at one point in the book, and for those that haven't read this book, it is so well written, and I I really felt like when I read it that I stepped into your family and got to know you and got to know your family, which was just such a gift. It really was such a gift.
Yeah.
At one point in your book, you discuss a letter from your father that he wrote to you during, for your bat mitzvah, and in it he tells you about creating, I'm going to quote here, corners of quiet peace and grace, which just beautiful. And I know you spoke about a little bit about having that night that you had, that night off. But what were the other ways that you created corners, especially when, you sorrow seemed so overwhelming?
Yeah. Well, another example would be one night when we were going to go out and our plans got sidelined, canceled nurse or babysitter or whatever. And our other two kids made my husband and me a candlelight dinner at
Mm.
the foot of Dahlia's bed. Now, Dahlia was in a hospital bed and there were a lot of machines in her room. So, we say candlelight, there was also like blinking of different machines and the hissing of the ventilator. But this idea that even there, even then, we could have a meal and be surrounded by such love that the other kids had done this for us, that we were at the foot of our daughter's bed. I mean, that was better than any you know, beautiful fancy restaurant. And so that was just like a little corner of quiet and grace and beauty, and you can do that. It's easy. And when everything is so high stakes, then the smallest, most ordinary thing becomes a victory. And there's beauty in that.
Thank you. What can friends and family do when they have people in their lives that are going through a similar situation, meaning that it would be very difficult just to take care of their loved one because they don't have the medical knowledge and it is a rare disorder, rare disease. What kind of advice can you give people so that they could help support their family or their
Sure.
friend?
Do not try to fix it. Do not try to solve it. Do not try to come up with a silver lining or look on the bright side kind of thing. Be there, listen, get comfortable sitting in sadness, and keep showing up.
Mm.
Specific examples. We have a couple friend, and prior to this, we used to go out to dinner with them quite a bit. We'd meet halfway, whatever. They just started coming to our house for dinner. I mean, not just showing up, we'd make a plan, but they'd come to us. It's 45-minute drive. They'd bring dinner. It was never about us reciprocating or anything like that. This is the way we could be friends with them. And they showed up in that very literal way. Another person, one of my kids was in Hebrew school, and she just called me and said, we've included my youngest in the carpool. I'll be taking him to and from, it was twice a week. Didn't ask me to take a shift, in a carpool, everybody kind of shares the driving duties. They just said, we've got him taken care of. It wasn't even really somebody I was friends with. It was just somebody who knew our situation. Not saying, therefore, hey, let me know if there's anything I can do, because I would never have thought about that, but just stepping in and doing. And so another example, a colleague of my husband's came by, and this was after Dalia died, but without making a big show of it, planted a beautiful dahlia garden in our yard. And it was such a gorgeous gesture, and it's something that's brought us so much joy in these last couple of years. So it's not saying, let me know if there's anything I can do. It's just doing. And there's always something you can do. And if you don't know what would be the right thing, here's an idea. Make a menu. Say, I'm not sure what you need, but here are like 10 ideas. Let me know if any of these would, check off whichever ones you want me to do. And maybe it's going to the grocery store, maybe it's taking the other kids out for ice cream, whatever it is. One final thing, keep inviting your friends. They may say no every single time, but they want to be invited. They're already feeling like they don't fit in anymore. They're already feeling isolated. Probably they're too tired or, whatever to go, but they want to be invited.
I love the making the menu. I know that when people are grieving, it's, cognitively, it's very difficult to come up with a list of what you need help with, right? And so to me, just saying, what can I, let me know if there's anything I could help with is almost like saying, I'm thinking of you, I'm praying for you.
Yeah.
You,
It puts the burden on the griever. And guess what? The
exactly.
griever's got enough going on without trying to figure out what you can do.
Exactly. So I love the menu idea. I love being really proactive and saying, this is what I can do. I'm just going to do it. Looking back, what has surprised you the most about how you handled Dalia's illness and her passing?
Well, what surprised me the most about handling the illness was that I handled the illness. I never in a million years would have supposed that I could do this. And what I take from that is that all of us can do more than we think we're capable of. I would not have signed up for it, no way. And I make a point of saying that because a lot of people assume I did sign up for it because Dalia was adopted. Now, I didn't sign up for it, and it's the thank God that Dalia was matched with us because I was 100 million% meant to be her mother and she was meant to be my daughter. And, that was how things were meant to turn out. But had you shown me a picture of what my life was going to be like, I would have been like, I can't do that. And you know what? We can do the things that scare us and the things that we think there's no way. Yes, we can do it.
Now, your book beautifully described the journey from anticipating loss to being fully present with what is. How has that transitioned to your life today and the way you live?
You know, Sometimes I think I've mastered it, and other times I think, boy, do I have a long way to go, So I remind myself and I try and follow Dahlia's example. I think about how she did, how she lived her life, and I try to learn from that. And I hope that, that's something people get out of the book is getting a little bit of Dahlia in them. And I try to remind myself that we don't have any control, right? All we can control is how we're going to respond to what's in front of us. And so I, you know, obviously I have a very different perspective than I had, a decade ago. I think there's no way to not emerge from the kind of life we lived for a very long time as a different person. And in as much as I'm a different person, um, it's a person that I am grateful to be because I credit the people I've lost for who I have become. And it's a way of honoring them.
Yeah, great. If you could share one message with parents or caregivers who are experiencing similar challenges, what would it be?
One message, that's hard. Well, I did already say the thing about you're capable of more that so I'm going to kind of be able to slip in two because I can add another one, and it's this. It is okay and it is possible to have joy alongside the fear and the anxiety and the darkness and the tragedy. You can have joy, you will have joy. Let it in, welcome it, and know that it can live side by side and hold hands with the grief, and that each becomes more powerful because of the other.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story with us. I know many people will be touched by it. Where can people learn more about you and your book, Breathtaking?
Well, thank you very much. First of breathtaking, 2 words, Jessica Fein, Fein, wherever you like to get your books. My website, jessicafeinstories.com, kind of has everything that's going on. I also do have a podcast called I Don't Know How You Do It. What else? I have a TED Talk coming up. I have a Substack called Fine by Me. So lots of things. I suggest, well, I hope everybody will buy the book, but otherwise go to jessicafeinstories.com and you'll see all the other stuff that's going on.
Thank you. Folks, today's conversation reminds me of how important it is not only to remember those before and after moments, but to also find ways to live fully in the present, even when life hands us the unexpected. I hope you leave today feeling inspired to seek out those small corners of quiet, peace, and grace where you can pause, breathe, reflect, and embrace what matters most. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.